Hello, I'm Ali Jennings, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to improve the colour of your images in a series of different ways using Photoshop CS5. So we're going to start off by taking a look at curves and how we can use curves to improve colour and tone. So in front of us here we have an image with two different curves processes applied. On the left hand side we have the original image and the original colour. The middle section here we've applied a very quick curves adjustment just to improve the colour, and on the final section we've had a bit of a play around and applied a cross process effect. So if we go to the original image just here, and the first thing we're going to do is look at how to use curves just to improve colour and tone. So the first thing we need to do just to create a curves adjustment layer, we go over to the layers palette, down to our adjustment layers, and we'll just select curves. And the first thing I want to do is just to add 2 points, and what we're going to do is create a very subtle S-curve. So I'll just click onto the line there just to add my 2 points. Now the lower point is just, if we increase that up we can lighten the shadows, and if we move it down we can just darken those shadows down. So for our first point in the shadows we're going to have an output value of about 63 and input value of 67. So we've just darkened that down slightly, so we've just darkened the shadow tones of the image down just a touch. Now we're going to take a look at the highlights. So if I click onto the highlights point, and here I just want to lighten up those highlights a bit, so I'm going to adjust the output value to 176, and the input value I want to move over to the left, just lightening up the tones to 145. And as you can see, that's just increased the tones just here, so we've just lightened up some of those highlights a little bit further. If I switch that layer off and back on again, I can just see that the colour and tone of the image now has a lot more impact. So that's very quickly how to improve colour and tone using curves. Now if you want to take that one stage further and start to really manipulate those colours using curves and apply a cross process effect, we can again do that, but this time we're going to take a look at the colour channels and really start to play around with these and manipulate those. So I'll just switch that layer off, create a new curves adjustment layer, and this time rather than going for the master channels I'm going to tackle each channel individually. So we'll start off with red. And this time I'm going to again apply 2 points, and on my first point in the shadows I'm going to increase the output to 77 and the input amount to 58. So we've just lightened up the shadows slightly. And then for the second point I'm going to have an output value of 168 and input value of 216. So there I've just darkened down the highlights, and you really start to see the effect that that's having. Now click back onto the channel selection, select green, and again I just want to make 2 points, one in shadows, one in the highlights. I'm going to click back onto my shadow point. This time I'm going to have an output value of 59 and input value of 90. So again we've just darkened down the shadows. Click onto my highlights point, keep it the output 188, and this time change the input value to 152, and again that's just lightening up those highlights, really getting that green influence coming through. Finally going to select the blue channel, again put in 2 points, and this time for the shadows I want to make sure that's selected, output value of 52 and input value of 80. Click on my highlight point and I want value of 197 and input value of 151. So again if I just click off the layer, so that's before and after, and you really see the cross process effect applying itself to those sticks of rock. So that's very quickly how to use curves to firstly correct colour, improve colour and tone, then secondly how to use curves to apply a cross process effect. The next area for colour correction that we want to take a look at is correcting in Adobe Camera Raw. So when you've got a RAW file, how to adjust the settings within ACR to get the best possible quality image. So here's a RAW file that I've opened directly from ACR without any correction at all. And here I have an image which has been corrected within ACR, improving the exposure, colour and tone. So we'll get straight into it, and the first thing we need to do is open up that RAW file. So I'll go to File, Open, just select our RAW file and click Open, and that'll automatically open up within ACR. Now the first thing we need to do is just to correct the colour balance, so really getting rid of that warm hue. So if we pick the white balance tool, then we're just going to click on an area of grey in the foreground, and that'll just correct our white balance. Now that we've done that, we just want to go over to our temperature and tint. If it's still looking a little bit warm, then we can just decrease the temperature slightly. I'll take that down to 150, and I'll just take the tint down a notch to +2. So I always use the white balance tool as a starter to your colour correction, and then you can just fine tune that using the temperature and tint sliders. Now that we've done that, you can see that the image itself is slightly underexposed, so we just want to boost the exposure, and only slightly, so we can take that up to about +1.05. And also if we go down to our brightness, we're just going to decrease that a couple of points down to +48. And if you take a look at the histogram, we've got quite a nice full histogram with loads of information. Now the next step is just to increase the contrast. I'm going to take that from +25 up to +64, and that's really increasing the contrast and tone of the image, so it's looking a lot more vibrant. And then I'm going to increase the clarity just up to 31, and that's slightly more subtle version of contrast, and that does the localized contrast rather than the contrast as a whole. And finally, I'm just going to boost the vibrance up to +10. So that's increasing the saturation of the less saturated colours to a greater degree than the more saturated colours. So if I just click Preview off, look at the image before and afterwards, and we can really see how the image has improved in colour. It's a lot more vibrant, a lot more pleasing to look at. Now if I want to open that in Photoshop, just click Open Image. Otherwise just click Done, and that'll save those settings down so that you can reopen those at a later date. So I'll just click Open Image to open that within Photoshop CS5. We'll now look at another technique for improving colour, and this is using the colour balance adjustment, and it can be a little bit more tricky to skill than most other forms of colour correction. So here we have our before image, and as you can see the colours are very subtle. If I click on colour after, and we can just see we've warmed that tone and the colour in the image up, and it's a lot more pleasing than the original image. So if I click back on colour before, and we go straight over to our adjustment layers, and we're going to select colour balance, and here we can see we've got a series of 3 sliders which go from cyan to add cyan to the image, or to red, likewise magenta, green, yellow and blue, and these sliders can be adjusted to adjust the tones within the image. Now we've also got 3 different controls, so we can adjust the colours dependent on shadows, midtones or highlights. Now for most colour correction, just tackling the midtones is the easiest option to go for, and will normally get you pretty good results. So first thing we're going to do is we just want to warm the image up, so we're going to increase the red to about 20. The magenta green combination is just about fine, but we do want to just increase the yellow just to really kick out the warmth within the image. So if we move the slider down towards yellow to -25, and just see how that's just created that warmth within the picture. So if I click the preview off and on again, you can just see the difference that that's made. Now to help improve the tone, I'm just going to create a quick curves adjustment. So down to my adjustment layers, down to curves, just going to create 2 points on our curves, And down in the shadows, I want to have an output of 43 and input of 61. So I've just darkened down the shadows, and you can see that's just helped improve the contrast of the image. And then in my highlights, I want my output to be 199 and my input to be 200. So we've just leveled out the highlights there, and we've just helped to improve the contrast and boost the saturation of those colours. So again, very quick and easy technique for improving the colour within your image using the colour balance feature of Photoshop CS5. The final colour improvement technique that we're going to look at is using the Vibrance adjustment, and this basically boosts the less saturated colour to a greater degree than the more saturated colours. So here we have the original image, and as you can see, the pinks of the blossom are looking a little bit dull, and what we're going to do is just use the Vibrance with a little bit of a saturation boost just to add more impact to those colours. So here's the before, and after we've applied the effect, you can really see how the oranges in the leaves and the pinks of the blossom are really standing out. So if I just go back to our before image, straight over to our adjustment filters, down to Vibrance, and we're just going to increase the Vibrance to about plus 45, and we're just going to boost the saturation as well up to about plus 23. Now if I just click the filter off and on again, and you can really see how that just kicks out the colour and really improves the colour and tone of the image. So that's the final technique for very quickly improving the colour of your images.